21st of 2024. Brenden Martin, our producer, we got a great show. Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports, covers
Lost my
Georgia like
coffee.
nobody else. And he'll be on with us. Yancey Porter Rebel Yell Hotline and Rodney Orr, Tider Insider. And look,
I lost my coffee.
Well, you got to find that because you'll keep you awake. But getting out and about today, Clay's Smoked Tuna will be located there from 11 until 2 p.m. at the Regional 1 Med in Memphis. They got smoked tuna, smoked salmon, smoked chicken, salad. They've got they've got a mobile food truck, and it's Food Truck Tuesday. They will cater. It will go anywhere you want
Roger.
to.
Deliver that
Clay
to my house.
It's great stuff. Okay.
Mobile tuna.
It's right. Mobile tuna. Smash the subscribe button, bottom right-hand corner. Allow notifications, Android and iPhone. Here comes the show. Here comes the judge, folks. Here we go.
Here comes the judge.
That's right. Flip Wilson.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Jordan Hill, I'm telling you what, there's never a time off, and appreciate you joining us this morning. We got magazines I think will be out on the newsstands. I checked at Walgreens yesterday in Memphis on the way back from the office. They're not out yet, but by this weekend they should be. And everybody has their opinions. We had Jake Wimberly on the show from down in Jackson, Mississippi last Wednesday. He's got his top 4. He does a matrix. It's really cool, and it's accurate. Years of proof. Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. So Dogs also keep getting in our polls of the top quarterbacks. The number 1 quarterback, Carson Beck. When was the last time? It's been a while. I mean, who is the best quarterback you've covered for Georgia, and where does Carson Beck rank on that list?
That's a tough question because especially I had left by the time Jake Fromm got there. I mean, it's probably Carson or Stetson Bennett. And, I think as far as what you look for in a quarterback, Carson's probably got the leg up. Stetson just was a playmaker, and just the fact he could move, I think, helped him. But, I think Carson's a really gifted guy. I think that he's going to come into the season with a lot of Heisman hype. I think you're going to see a lot of preseason, All-American status for Carson. It's building up for a really interesting year. And someone was asking me on Monday just about, do you think we'll see a big media blitz from Carson trying to get a lot of attention, for the Heisman, for just all kinds of awards? And I said, we'll probably see him in Dallas at SEC Media Days, but I think other than that, you probably won't see a ton from Carson. You may see maybe some stuff related to the College Football 25 game since he's on that deluxe edition. But, my point was really, Georgia's got a tough enough schedule. They don't really need to build him up right now. That you play in Tuscaloosa, you play in Austin, you play in Oxford. Whatever you said in the preseason, I don't think is not really all that necessary, because you'll get a lot of attention from what you do in the season.
Well, he reminds me a lot of Marcus Aurelius and the great Roman emperor and the group of smart people called the Stoics. He's very calm. This is his 4th year in the system at Georgia. I think he is the definite alpha male leader on that team. Agree or disagree?
I would think so. And what's funny is he's not a guy that talks a lot, and that's something that Kirby's talked about. And I think Carson has made a concerted effort to get better at that, from what we can tell from what was said in the spring. And I think it's just funny. Anytime Carson talks, he's pretty laid back. He was asked, there's a lot of attention, he's got a Lamborghini now, and he was asked about it, and he was like, it's just a car. Like, he just sort of was just nonchalant about it. I think that's mostly how he goes about his business. But, from what I can tell and from what his teammates have said, he's mainly a guy that is going to lead by example and lead by doing. But I do think he's grown a lot in, when something needs to be said, being willing to be that guy who says it.
Yeah, I like him out of Jacksonville. I think all three quarterbacks in the quarterback room at Georgia are from the state of Florida, and there's just so much talent down there. All right, now next question. And the last 1,000-yard receiver that Georgia had would have to be Terrence Edwards from Sandersville, Georgia, Washington County High School. Robert Edwards' cousin or brother, and Takeo Spikes came from that school. There have been some really good players. Is Georgia more likely to have their next 1,000-yard receiver be a tight end or a wide receiver? Because Brock Bowers from Napa, California, got really, really close. How close was he to 1,000? And if there was some malfeasance in the accounting, could he have gotten to 1,000? Oh, yeah, I forgot about that catch he had.
That feels like something would have happened in high school football, Rob.
Yeah, exactly.
A couple more yards in some of those non-region games. No,
oh yeah.
I think I think it would be a wide receiver just because Brock was just so out of this world at tight end. That was so rare.
Yeah.
I mean, his freshman year at Georgia, he set the program record for receptions, receiving yards by a tight end. I think he probably also set it for touchdown receptions for a tight end. But, I've kind of come to the belief after, Brock not setting that record. And I think if he stays healthy last season, he probably gets it. But he gets hurt against Vanderbilt in mid-October, and it kind of knocked his chances of doing that out. I don't know that we're ever going to see a 1,000-yard receiver for Georgia, but I don't see that as a negative. I think that just shows you they are very intentional about how deep they recruit at wide receiver, and they rotate guys a ton. I mean, there's guys, like Colby Young and Rara Thomas. They play the same position. They're both X receivers. Rara may get beaten out by this Miami transfer, Colby Young, but I still think Rara is going to make a lot of plays, and I think he's going to be involved a lot. So I think Georgia has basically willingly kind of moved away from ever hitting that 1,000-yard receiver. I mean, it would have to be someone super special, and I mean, it's entirely possible. But I think they are fine spread the ball out a little bit more and getting other guys involved. And, I think that helps them when you look to future recruiting classes. You can sell to guys like, yeah, we are deep, but look how many different receivers we play in a given game. You can come here and you may not start right away, but you still have a chance to contribute early on and still make an impact on this offense.
Well, if you think about it, look at the stats. I remember a few years ago hearing a stat. There had been 8 times when an opponent had passed for more than 400 yards against Auburn, and Auburn's record in those games was 8-0. Now, let's think about this. If an opponent rushes for 400 yards on you, you're probably 0-8. I think that's the demonstrative statement there, what you said about Georgia. It's like, you may not see it, not anytime soon, but also want to give you credit for identifying a guy that I think is going to have a really good career, kind of like some of those Patriot wide receivers, is Ladd McConkey, who's got one of the great names. I mean, he's bound for Hollywood. Liam Neeson, when he steps down and quits sending his daughter to Paris alone, Ladd McConkey will take over. And maybe he'll send her to Athens alone. I don't know. But I think you identified him, and his combine numbers were like a 4.3 and change. Incredible. Let's talk about the running back situation. We know Etienne from Florida is up there, but Georgia typically is one of the deepest running back rooms in the country. Kind of expand on that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that you're going to see a running back by committee again this season. I mean, Trevor Etienne is very clearly going to be the starter. Roderick Robinson, I thought, was the most impressive of those guys that have come back. He looked great in the spring. He's just going to be a redshirt freshman this season, so he's got a chance to really shine. Branson Robinson's the big question mark for me. He's a guy that got hurt in fall camp, had a really tough injury, working his way back. Hoping next week when we're down in Destin for spring meetings to ask Kirby just how Branson's coming along. He dressed out at the spring game and did the pregame stretches, didn't play, which I don't think was a surprise. But to have him out there even suited up, I thought was a good sign for the recovery. Lost Andrew Paul after the spring. He transferred to Jacksonville State. And then you got 3 freshmen. You got Chauncey Bowens, who was one of the early enrollees. He looked pretty good in that G-Day spring game. And then you got Nate Frazier, and you got another running back as well coming in who are going to come in and try to make an impact right away. And Dwight Phillips Jr. is the other running back I was trying to think of. They have a ton of guys, and I think it's going to be a situation where you're going to get Trevor a lot of touches. Roderick Robinson, like I said, I think he's going to play a bunch. And then I think you see where Branson Robinson is health wise and see if one of these freshmen can break out and show you can count on them to play a little bit.
Well, the freshmen that are coming in, and you get the luck, you and Jason Caldwell, both of y'all work so you know Jason well. I mean, y'all are two of the best in the business. And you don't drink the Kool-Aid. And that's what I respect so much about you. And you see so many players in these camps, and you're recently married, and you're going to end up having a big family. Get it in while you can, all those road trips. I mean, but talk about the level of talent in Georgia now compared to where it was 10 years ago, and the running backs in the state of Georgia that you're seeing. Are less kids wanting to be a running back?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the talent in Georgia, it's really interesting. Just in the last decade, you look at somewhere like Gwinnett County and how the population has exploded,
Yeah.
but it does present a challenge for Georgia because a lot of those guys didn't grow up in Georgia. They didn't grow up going to Georgia. They didn't grow up watching Georgia on TV. So it's a little bit harder to convince guys like that to just stay home and go to the home state school because they moved around but yeah, I mean, I think the talent is still top of the line. Per capita, Georgia's one of the best when it comes to high school talent. And yeah, I think this is a really interesting year when it comes to running backs in this state. I know Lee County down there, they've got a really good running back that Georgia's been looking after. There's a lot of talent in this state again. It has been fascinating to me in the last 4 or 5 years to watch some of the neighboring states. North Carolina has gotten a lot of credit for the job and the boom that they've had, and Georgia just took advantage of it, getting guys like Jalen Walker, Jamal Jarrett out of North Carolina, and then even going back, Jordan Davis. Got to mention him and
Charlotte,
getting him out of North Carolina. And then, Rob, I've been impressed just the last few years with what Alabama has done, the state of Alabama. I mean, coming out, I think that was a 24 class that for a few years people had pegged as watch this class. This is going to be a special class. And I think the state continues to produce it. It's really fun for me, especially having covered high school sports in Alabama, to see that continue. And I don't think that's changing. I think Alabama has really done a good job at the high school level. And you're seeing it with a lot of kids going and playing major FBS football. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see that going forward.
Yeah, I think number 1 in the country is Texas. Number 2 is Florida. 3, California. 4 is Georgia with over 250 D1 players. And it's funny is Georgia State and other schools in Kennesaw State, there's more kids want to play football. There's more scholarship opportunities. And I think about, because Jason Caldwell said that the state of Alabama, he said this 2 years ago, is where the state of Georgia was 10 years ago. So Alabama's putting out 140 plus D1 players. Used to be about 90. It's changed. Katrina changed a lot. It really did. It shifted a lot of stuff around. You look now, in my opinion, you talked about Jordan Davis out of Charlotte. What is, in your opinion, Charlotte? I know it's the home of the ACC headquarters, but also the SEC network, NASCAR, the National Whitewater Training Center, and it is the banking center of the South, if not the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think Charlotte's one of those hubs, sort of like Atlanta. I think about every year, Georgia signs like the top 3 class every year, and fans are upset that they can't lock down Atlanta. It's just that's a city that size, you're not going to get every kid. And I think that, Georgia has done a great job making inroads, really in North Carolina in general, but, hitting up some really big programs around Charlotte, and it's paid major dividends, even. I mentioned some of those guys a few minutes ago. I mean, they got other guys like Chris Pill that they pulled out of North Carolina. I think there was another guy, too, that they signed in that class. Kyron Jones was a guy they flipped from NC State. He was going to go to NC State and be a running back. And at the last minute, Georgia says, hey, why don't you come play DB for us? And flipped from NC State and came to Georgia. So, yeah, I think it's one of those situations, a city of Charlotte's size, You're not going to get every kid, especially if you're Georgia, being an out-of-state school.
Yeah.
But they have done a very good job of evaluating talent in and around Charlotte. And it's paid off. They've gotten some really good players out of there.
They have, and it used to be a kid like Jordan Davis would have played basketball, and he was a really good basketball recruit. And now he's, in the NFL doing his thing, and 6'7", 340. We got about 5 more minutes. Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports. Jordan, tell them about Dogs 24/7, about your podcast and how they can follow you on Twitter, because a lot of times I do that at the end, and I don't want to ever miss that. But then I got a couple more questions, and we'll let you go because I know you got them stacked up like they call the car wash, but you put out great information.
I appreciate that, Rob. Yeah, dogs247.com. Got all kinds of recruiting stuff coming out of a busy weekend for Georgia. And then the Junkyard Dogcast, we got our podcast. We're actually going to be recording live over there on that YouTube, Dogs247 at 3 p.m. Eastern time today. So, yeah, it's one of those times of year where you stay busy enough, and like I said, we'll be at spring meetings, and before you turn around, we'll be at SEC Media Days. But busy enough is my kind of busy. We still got a lot to talk about, and still plenty of time to start previewing, the big upcoming games this fall.
Well, one of the things I love about you is you are always excited. You love what you do, and you do what you love. And you've also got a good perspective on the schools in the Southeast. I've got a question. What are you looking for at the spring meetings in Destin? You think there'll be vote about going to a 9 or 10 game schedule now that Texas and OU, well, July 1st is the official date, but they're going to want to go for a bigger schedule. I think it's some of the other schools that were scared because they got to have that 6 to get bowl eligible. You're thinking small like that as a school is a disservice to your fan base and your own team.
Definitely. And I think that is going to be a big conversation piece. Now, will it get decided? I'm not sure, because we thought last year, for sure, they're going to get this thing figured out. And they were like, all right, here's what we're doing for the 2024 season. And then, it's been a little while later since we figured out they're basically sticking with the same schedule and changing up home and away for 25. So that's my big point that I'm going to be watching. There's other conversation pieces that I'm intrigued to just hear what is said. There's been talk about getting rid of walk-ons with new NIL. There's a lot of talk about, player compensation and what that's going to look like going forward. So I think as far as SEC specific, that 2026 schedule is going to be a big talking point. But I think there's going to be a lot of college athletic related conversations again about, how players are paid, and walk-on situations and things like that. There's probably other stuff that's going to come up that's SEC based, but I think a lot of it's going to be about just the current state of college athletics and what the conference wants to do going forward.
Yeah, and I think it will be fun. If you have a 9 or 10 game schedule, you think about in 2020, the year of the virus, that was an incredible season because every weekend you had a conference game and it just automatically carried a lot of weight. But you play a couple of non-conference games. Hell, Georgia could play Georgia State. They could play Kennesaw State. I mean, I think there'd be Georgia's like Auburn and Alabama. They're going to sell out because their fans are going to see them play. You're at the right program when your fans are. I don't care who we're playing. I really don't. I'm going to see my school play. All right, Jordan, one more. Give me a name out there, and I like to do this, that you're hearing a lot of things about in the offseason, offense, defense, special teams, whatever, for Georgia, because every year there's a guy like Jordan Davis, there's a Lad McConkey out there, and you know better than anybody.
I would say the name I would throw out there is KJ Bolden, who obviously was a big-time recruit, committed to Florida. Yep, committed to Florida State.
Yeah.
And Georgia gets him at the end, and I thought he really impressed toward the end of spring practice, and I think he's a guy that I'm not convinced right now that he's going to start when they take the field against Clemson, but I think he's done a lot to help his cause. And what I am really intrigued by, he was one of the kick returners at G-Day, and I think that's where you're going to see it. I think you're going to see him involved on special teams, and he's going to make plays there. And it's a lot like what Malachi Starks did his freshman year. He gets in the game against Oregon. By the end of the first quarter, he's falling backwards, making an absolutely incredible acrobatic interception of Bo Nix. and basically the rest was history. So
Yeah.
I would watch KJ Bolden. I want to see what he does through this summer. I don't know that he starts against Clemson, but I think he's going to assert himself pretty early.
Yeah, Malachi Starks was a just stud from the day he got to Georgia. And that Buford program, that's a hard nut to crack to get players out of there. I mean, they it's about, 8-minute drive from the Mad Italian over in Dunwoody. By the way, that's a great place to eat, the Mad Italian. I love it. But it'll be fun to watch. I agree with you about KJ Bolden. He is an elite. I bet he's a top 6, top 8 player in the country as a freshman. I think he's that talented. All right, Jordan, we'll do it again next week. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. Man, I'll tell you what, we're just getting closer. You know what? We're getting closer to media days. First off, we're going to have the football magazines coming out in the next week. So next week we'll talk about them. Thanks so much.
Sounds great. See you guys.
You bet. All right, Brenden, and to people, I know we have a lot of people that, they watch the show live, but they also watch it on their commute.
Thousands.
And you could be watching, and you could be driving on the interstate in your commute to and from work, or say to and fro. And or as they say in the country, they say it a lot down here in Arkansas and Tennessee, whatnot and such. I don't know what whatnots and such are, but
it's
big.
The same as like yada yada yada, and it's the same as like is what it is. Like every part of the country has a version of whatnot and whatever. Yancey Portal's probably got an opinion on that. Yancey Porter, welcome to the broadcast. How are you, sir?
Yancey, good morning. Did you hear what Brenden called Yancey Portal?
Well, I was thinking about multiple dimensions this morning when I was going over my string theory. Yeah. So sorry, Mr. Porter.
I love it. No, that's a great marketing. That's a great marketing campaign. Yancey Portal out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, down there, and that would be in Forest County, my friends, near Petal. Near the Canebrake subdivision, home of the Hub City Hustle, one of my favorite triathlons I've done. Yancey, last night, listen to the show, man. Great job. Rebel Yell Hotline, folks. Check it out. Monday nights at 6 p.m. Sports 56 WHBQ in Memphis and Super Talk Mississippi all over. Chuck Roundsville, Harry Harrison, Gary Darby, Gordon Ford. Look, man, baseball. Your guest, one of your guests last night, is a regular on this show, Mitch Davis. Also heard another one of your guests, and he was saying about the talk. Is there any talk in Hoover about Ole Miss? And he said, not really. And y'all were like, maybe that's a good thing. Let's get a checkup. Let's look under the hood on Ole Miss baseball right now in Hoover. Yancey.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to get.
Okay.
See, time traveler.
Time traveler, here he is. But Yancey, what are your thoughts about what Ole Miss is going to do in Hoover? How do you think they're going to fare? Because it's a tough 12-team field. Only Auburn and Missouri didn't make the cut. But if Ole Miss wins 2 or 3 games, if they win 3 games in Hoover, do they get any chance they get a bid to the NCAA tournament?
Nope. No, Mr. Portal is back in the time portal. Let's see if he comes back to us in a second.
Yeah, but I mean that's going to be a tough out. And Brenden, we talked with Mitch yesterday.
Yeah,
and you've got Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas. Tough. It's a brutal Texas A&M. Yeah. Arkansas is a team. Their fans are so starved for a championship. Well, first off, what fan base is not starved for a championship? And I'll tell you something. They're like eating great steaks, great seafood, whatever. They never get old. Okay? That's the bottom line.
Unless you leave them out from the fridge.
Yeah. But
I think this is where I get interested more in baseball for especially in the SEC. Because I've been in Colorado and growing up, I've been out and worked the college baseball World Series in Omaha. And it's such a fun, they do such a good job with it. It's such a fun event, to go out and be a part of it. And I think college baseball is really exciting. So anyways, yeah, I think this time of year is good. And I will say, listening to Mitch yesterday, I agree with you. He's if anyone knows, it's him. I've been sort of following his his commentary over the season thus far. He's been pretty close.
Yep.
With I mean, if he consumes baseball like the guy consumes basketball, then we should just hire him.
Yeah, Mitch is really on point with the SEC baseball, and I think you've got to go into Hoover. You can't go in there with a half-ass approach like it doesn't matter, because it does. And what draws the crowds, if Ole Miss if it's close, a team like Ole Miss is always going to get the regional, okay, because they'll sell out. Right. Every game. They've got 3,000 or 4,000 people on a waiting list for season tickets. And so that's what you want. But you know what's crazy? You look at a program like Florida.
Florida's game
has been so good for so long in pretty much everything that they're just used to it. I mean, 268 SEC championships. It's over 100 from second place, okay? That's pretty amazing.
A heartbreaker. Sort of a heartbreaker season last year, to sort of fall short after the run that they were on, and I went to a lot of the home games. There's Mr. Portal.
Okay,
bring him back in. I went to a lot of the home games, but Ole Miss and what's going down there in Mississippi State. Hey, Mr. Portal.
Yes, sir.
Are you back with us?
I'm here. Are y'all able to hear me clearly?
We got you. But we were just talking about Hoover.
Back from time travel.
Hoover's a big deal, and I listened to Rebel Yell Hotline in my truck last night, driving all over Memphis and East Arkansas, and I was listening. Maybe there's not so much talk about Ole Miss this year. You go back 2 years ago, they won a national championship, and y'all talked about you don't have guys like Elko and some of the other guys that have been in the system for 3 or 4 years. You got a lot of guys that have barely been there. Expand on that, because that's got to be a problem, I would imagine, at every SEC school, and how you manage it means everything.
Yeah, I mean, Bianco is really, his program's all been about developing players throughout the years, and now we're in this new era where you have players coming in and out of your system. And I just think it's, it's been hard for him to adapt to this new era, to be honest. We got it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Dabo over there at Clemson in football. I just think that Bianco likes for players to be in the system 2 or 3 years and develop them and learn through the ropes. And now you're not able to do that. And I don't know what he's going to be able to do to adapt to this new era. And it might be too little too late after this year. We'll see if he gets another year or not. But it's been rough.
All right, let's think about that. The portal is really big, obviously, in football, just more numbers. Basketball, same thing. You look at your pitching staff, that's what gets everybody. My theory is too many of these kids have been playing baseball for so long, their arms are worn out. It's kind of like the running backs that used to come to the NFL carrying the ball 30 plus times a game. Now everybody wants this running back by committee. So if you're the all-time leading rusher at a school in the Southeastern Conference, you can probably hold on to that record for a long, long time.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. Ole Miss lost their top 2 pitchers. Their Friday and Saturday guys before the season started. Lost their setup guy before the season started. And that threw them in the loop. And we saw that happen last year as well. They lost some important pieces to the puzzle on the mound for them. And they were not able to overcome it. And the same thing happened this year. When you lose your Friday and Saturday guys a couple of weeks before the season starts, it's tough for anyone. But you got to have the depth, so that's part of roster construction. How much money are you going to spend on your top couple guys? Do you spend more money on having solid pieces for depth? Again, it's been hard for this staff, I believe, to adapt to the new portal era and the NIL era, and how much money you spend at players in certain positions, and do you go for superstars at the top, or do you go for depth, towards the bottom? It's just, I don't have all the answers, but what they've been doing the last couple of years has not been working.
Well, it hasn't, not the last 2 years, and it's struggle at LSU this year after winning the national championship. Of course, there's no Paul Skenes there. Mississippi State has shown more signs of life than any of those two, but they won their title back in the summer of 21. College baseball, the SEC is going to have, I would think, 8 or 9 at least play in the NCAA tournament. You think there's going to be more?
Possibly. I mean, depending on the SEC tournament. The SEC tournament, it counts just like a regular season game. So a lot of fans think that the season is over once you get to the tournament, but that's not true. When the committee gets together and they're going over your resume, let's say hypothetically you're 15-15 in the regular season, and you win 3 tournament games and you lose 2, your record is 18-17 on the board when they go over your record. So, there's a lot of teams. You take Florida, for example. You take the LSU, for example. If they have a good tournament, you can get as many as 10 or 11 teams in the NCAA regions.
Yeah. Outside the SEC, who's the biggest threat? Big 12, ACC?
Conference-wise or team-wise?
Conference-wise.
Yeah, I would say Big 12, ACC, your normal kind of players. Those 2 would be your safe bets, but it's the SEC and everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be fun. Hey, how you fight is how you live. Rumble Boxing. Love it. 1835 Union Avenue, Midtown, Memphis. I like that. How you fight is how you live. All right, got some questions on football right now. And it's going to be the pressure and the momentum is going to be just building up every day as we get closer and closer. Football magazines will be coming out this weekend, Yancey. I'll be up on the Spring River with a lot of people. A lot of them are Ole Miss fans. And there's 2 camps. There's people that are like, well, they haven't ever been to Atlanta. I'll believe it when I see it. You can say that. But then, well, it's different this time. Which of those camps are you in?
Well, I always look at you got to start at two things: your head coach and your quarterback, and
yeah,
they look very comfortable there. And then you look at the line of scrimmage, and they look very very salty on the line of scrimmage. A lot of veterans, a lot of experience, a lot of starters returning on both sides. Then you look at depth along that line of scrimmage, and that's where they really attacked the portal this year, getting much deeper, especially along the offensive line. They've been pretty deep on the defensive line for the last couple of years, but they added even more depth there. And then you look at corners. Somebody's got to cover all these great wide receivers around the country, and they've done a really good job there. When I say elite at corner, I wouldn't put them in that elite. When I say that might be the area that would be, if I were opposing coach that would try to attack Ole Miss the most, yes. So if they're corners, I think they've got 3 or 4 really good ones. If they can stay relatively healthy there at corner, they got a great shot.
Yeah, I don't know if it's something. It sounds almost like a bullfrog is under there about every other word, kind of like. So you might want to reboot whatever. But because I want to get into this because Rodney Orr is going to be on here with us in a few minutes. But I'm looking at Ole Miss on the defensive line, and that's where I'm putting a lot of my faith in Ole Miss. That is such a critical area. and your front seven, you've got to be 2 or 3 deep. Last year on the line of scrimmage in Ole Miss's 2 losses, it was obvious they were deficient there. Offense, defensive lines, whatever. Injuries are part of it. But the loss to Alabama, as the game went on, Alabama wore Ole Miss down. But the real, flock of seagulls in the coal mine was 52-17 against Georgia in Athens. Flip the script, you got them in the vault this year. How much progress has Ole Miss made, in your opinion, along the line of scrimmage, offensive and defensive line, since that Georgia loss? Now, obviously, they haven't played since the win over Penn State, but what they brought in recruiting and in the portal should give you a good idea, I would think, as smart as you are.
Yeah, I think again that's where they really attacked was on the defensive line. Excuse me, the offensive line in the portal. They picked up 4 starters from other big time programs, including 2 from Washington. That had the offensive line of the year there. So they feel like that's where they really helped the team the most this all season is along that offensive line. Defensive line, I thought last year it had really good depth. They picked up a couple all SEC players over the all season from other schools. They didn't lose, but one really piece on that defensive line from last year. I think they're ready to go along the line of scrimmage. I really do. Now, do they have Walter Nolan's projected to be a top 10 type pick, but he hasn't really shown it yet on the football field like just a dominant, the best player on the field. He tilts the field his way. That's what I'm really trying to see on that defensive line. They got a lot of really good players and a couple players that can go first round. But do they have that player that is tilting the field their way? We'll see.
Well, you talk about 3 of the top 4 guys in the portal on the defensive line come in with Ole Miss. And I don't know, Yancey, if you want to reboot real quick and try to come on, I think it's like about every second or third word, there's kind of like a bullfrog, kind of like, and I don't know if it's something in the line or whatever, but I want to get into now on the offensive line because that area, that's the hardest position to find players. It just seems
that was like a bullfrog. I don't
know what it is. It's a blue jay on the line or something. I don't know what it is. But let me tell you what. Is Yancey, I don't know what it was coming in, but with the offensive line, you talk about you got 16 teams in the SEC with a starting 5. That's 80, and there might be 25 really good offensive linemen in the country if you look at the recruiting services, which we all do. So you've got to be able to develop offensive linemen, and you got to have a great coach in that offensive line room.
I think that's, obvious. We're not saying anything earth shattering, right? But I think if you want to compete, you got to have offensive and defensive dominance, on either side of the ball for a lineman. Sorry, I was trying to get. Oh, wait, somebody's here. Don't know. It just says guest with no video feed. It's like a ghost feed. Someone's checked that, but we can't put them on yet. Oh, that's Yancey. We'll see.
Hold on. Bodkin. Yeah.
Here we go. Bodkin. Here we go.
All right, Yancey.
Mr. Porter.
Let's flip over to the offensive line because you look at a guy like Matt Luke. He went to Georgia a couple of years, then he stepped out for a couple of years, and he's back at Clemson with Dabo now. Let's talk about the offensive line coach at Ole Miss, and what do you think about that room? If you can't develop them, it is such a hard position as it is, but if you're not developing them, it puts the whole team at risk. I can't even imagine. That's the problem. And I look around the SEC.
But you're right though, because look, it's size too, right? You're not just developing talent. It's so much is always, I think, sort of forgotten about with the everyday fan that that the training room is everything, and what happens in the off season obviously matters. And these offensive linemen not only have to be huge, but you have to be it's like the dancing sort of elephant sort of thing in the cartoon. They have to be agile. A lot of these dynamic offensive, and they have to be smart. And a lot of these guys don't get developed that way in high school. They're just big, and they go up and they just throw elbows up, and they just don't understand the complexities of some of these offenses. So I think that's more one of the it's the football IQ that really matters with a lot of these linemen, and if you don't have it, you're not going to compete in the SEC. It's plain and simple. And that's why teams like Oklahoma that came in right away identified that that's what they needed to do to get better and to get bigger and to compete in the SEC. I actually agree with you, Rob, that I think Oklahoma will be sort of of the two, Oklahoma and Texas. I think Oklahoma will be sort of the one to watch, because I think they're going to be. I've seen that team my whole life, especially in Colorado, watching that football. I got a lot of friends that are Boomer Sooner, so it'll be interesting to watch. And shoot, I was there when Florida beat them for the Natty, so I was on the sidelines for that, running on the field, so that was also good to see Boomer Sooner go.
But they play a different kind of football out there. Okay, Yancey, when you're back with us, jump in. But I tell you, technical difficulties part of it. But
everyone's got their issues.
The 2008 Florida-Oklahoma game, in the 5 games prior to playing Florida, Oklahoma averaged just under 60 points per game, and Florida held them to 14. Yancey, let's jump back in on the.
Let's see if he's there. Mr. Porter, are you there?
Offensive line at Ole Miss.
Mr. Porter?
Man, we're really trying here.
Yeah, there you go, bud. Yeah, that's right. Never quit, never say die.
Been a difficult morning.
Hey, man, we're just grateful you're here. Thanks for sticking with it.
Yeah, it's tough sometimes with the connection there with the Wi-Fi and everything else.
You sound perfect.
You sound great now. It's that metal plate in Brendan's head.
It's really just about the depth, I believe, that they brought in. Again, you got 2 key players off of Washington's staff, offensive line unit there that, won the award as the top offensive line unit in the country. You bring back 4 starters off your own offensive line. You pick up another Power 5 experienced offensive line starters. They feel like that's where they really improved the team the most. This offseason is along the offensive line. So I think, that's what has everybody so optimistic, because as you saw last year, when they lost their 2 starters the week of the Georgia game, and then lost another starter the first play of the game against Georgia. So they were without 3 of their 5 starters. And I mean, it was a butt whipping from there, right? I mean, Ole Miss jumped up 21-7 against them, and then the rest of the game, I think they got outscored like 45 to 3 or something, it was bad. And so they knew they had to get bigger, they had to get deeper, they had to get stronger along the line of scrimmage, really more towards the offensive line. I think really defensive line, they were pretty deep. I thought they were pretty good along there, but they added some big time pieces there, some all SEC guys projected to go in the first round this year. Again, though, I want to see if they can really tilt the field. Do they have, they might have projectability on the next level, and they might be very solid, but I haven't seen them just dominate. A player or two, just when your wife can say he's the best player on the field. And that's what I want to see. Can they get 1 or 2 of those guys to surface along the defensive line?
Yeah, and the offensive lines across college football are completely different. I mean, Oklahoma lost all 5 of theirs at the end of the season this year, along with quarterback Dylan Gabriel. So they're putting in all new guys. And it takes real game experience to learn about each other, about tendencies, your guards and tackles, and those guys. The center is the quarterback of the offensive line. That you never hear about a center coming out of high school as a 5-star. Center is usually a guy that starts his career at 6'3" and finishes under 6 feet because his body just gets crunched in like an accordion. That's a tough damn position to play. All right, Yancey, Rodney Orr hopefully can join us. We've got a hard out exit here at about 58 after. It's got about 15 minutes to go. Let's look around Texas. I definitely think Texas is ready to play in the SEC. Jake Wimberly down in Jackson is on. His top four right now, barring some off the field disaster, are Texas, Georgia, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. I'm good on all three. No problem. Texas, Georgia, and Ole Miss. Tennessee. You know this conference well. Josh Heupel, he's got him a quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, but you got to have more than that. But they also have an edge rusher who might be the number one pick in the draft. Is Tennessee, is that a stretch, or do you say, yeah, they belong there? Who else would be the fourth best?
Alabama.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I think Alabama in there with Georgia, and I'm still look. As I said earlier, the two things that I look at when you are going into the season is who your head coach is and who's your quarterback, right? So Tennessee checks the boxes there. Texas checks the boxes there. We'll see about Tennessee's. He's not. A lot of hype built up from high school, and we'll see how he does out on the field. But Texas now, they lost. They lost all their studs. It seems like along the
Yeah.
line of scrimmage. That's really
Yeah.
they got hit harder than anybody else along the line of scrimmage. And I want to see how they fill those pieces. Those three
Yeah.
stud defensive linemen are all top 2 round draft picks this past year. They lost 4 offensive line starters along the front there. I'm really curious to see losing that much along the line of scrimmage as Texas did. Can they just reload? And join the SEC at the same time. We'll see. If there's going to be one that has a stumbling block to me, out of Ole Miss, Georgia, Texas, and Alabama, I suspect my suspicion is that Texas will be the one that has a disappointing season.
All right, Bo Davis, defensive line coach, also has left, and he's at LSU.
That's
And
right.
that was a
right. The heart and
huge,
soul.
yeah, huge deal.
Yeah.
Now, Ole Miss has got to take a trip down to the Swamp. Let's talk about that. We all remember, was it September 29th, 2008, when Ole Miss beat Florida and Tebow gave his speech about they'd never lose again. That's an incredible venue in college football. Lane Kiffin has got to be loving all this attention. But let's talk about that matchup and some games that you're really worried about with Ole Miss this year.
Well, I'm definitely, if there's one that I've circled that I'm worried about more than any other one on the schedule, it's Florida, without question. And everybody looks at me crooked when I say that, and they're like, "What about Georgia?" Well, you know what you're going to get out of Georgia, right? I mean, you can
Yeah.
lose to Georgia and still make the playoffs. But let me tell you something: that the talk down there, and it's going to heat up in the midseason. It's going to be all about Lane Kiffin down there at Florida, and that Florida staff is not going to like that too much. And they're going
Yeah.
to be catching them towards the end of the year. That staff down there is going to be fighting for their lives, their coaching lives, and they're going to have that game circled against Ole Miss. And there is going to be a lot of hype built up around it. And it's I think Florida plays their best game of the year against Ole Miss. I really do, and it's going to be a dogfight. I really do. I think Florida's really improved tremendously there at quarterback. I think they've improved along the line of scrimmage. They've done a great job recruiting there. If they did not have that schedule, they could be really the surprise of the SEC, and everybody else is already burying Florida before the season starts. But that is a really talented roster.
Yeah, it is.
Isn't that where you want
Yancey,
to? But don't you want, Yancey? Don't you? In a lot of ways, if you're a head coach, I think you want to start there. It's a good place to start for the locker room. Hey, we're not supposed to. Nobody's expecting you to do anything. I think for once, Florida's starting a season with not sort of expectations of like going to win the national championship. I think that plays, to their advantage to some degree, or to a lot, because I think that's an easier motivator, especially early on, that we could really go do something here and surprise a lot of people. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you look again. You always start with the head coach and the quarterback, right? And what has really hurt Florida these last few years has been quarterback, and they've gotten much better. That spring game showed me that there's been tremendous improvement there at quarterback, and
Well, yeah.
they weren't bad at the other areas, but when
Well, Mertz
it's all
coming
about your
back.
quarterback.
Yeah, Mertz
Yeah.
coming back, I think was a big piece of this. We talked about that this year when he, signed early, and I think him deciding to come back early was, was also, huge in that department. And then obviously DJ Lagway coming in. I think we're going to see some interesting stuff out of the backfield. But my question to you is that we're talking offensive and defensive linemen, O-line, and Florida certainly has struggled immensely, and especially on both sides there. And we've gotten better. We've got obviously a new coach there. Do you feel like, I don't know how far do you dig into that, but we're talking about how that's the keys to success to win in the SEC. How do you think? How do you think Florida's looking for that, because that was an issue to keep even Graham Mertz, who had a great season last season, healthy?
Yeah, I think really the offensive line. I think I like their defensive line. I really do. But I think the offensive line is going to be the biggest question mark, so to speak, going into the season for Florida. If they can really hold bay and just be solid there, they've got a chance. Again, it's all about that schedule right now. But here's the deal about schedules: that's preseason projections on what a
Correct.
team is supposed to be.
Right.
And as we know, 50 to 70% of the teams that are projected to be at a certain level end up being another level. So
Yeah.
that could change
Especially now.
drastically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about this being the hardest schedule in the history of college football.
No, it's
On
Yeah.
not.
paper, preseason, right? It looks very daunting, but how do these teams actually play this season is another question mark. I think really to me, when I'm looking at Florida, I would think that the offensive line would be the biggest question mark. Just like I said with Ole Miss, I would attack them with the cornerbacks. Because I still want to see how that depth plays out there at corner. I would really attack Florida on the offensive line.
Well,
Yeah.
my take on it is exactly that. Here it is, May 21st. It's easy to look at that schedule because you're assuming automatically that all the prognosticators are going to be 100% right. There's an old
That's right.
saying in the technical market analysis in the stock market: it's hard for everybody to be right at the same time, okay? That's just not how it works. Florida's schedule is not even close to being the toughest schedule of all time. It's not even, for someone to say that
Well, we don't know yet.
is malfeasance, because
Yeah.
no, you look at a schedule that some of these SEC teams play, they beat 4 or 5 or 6. In the case of LSU in 2019, they beat 7 teams in the top 10 or higher. Okay, that's the toughest schedule I've ever seen. So you can't even, Florida's schedule. It's because Miami. Again, you're looking out of the rearview mirror. Central Florida, what have they done at the bounce house except create a lot of static and noise? Okay, what
Give
Florida
themselves
State,
an award.
yeah, they gave themselves an award. Yeah, if Auburn would have been interested when they played them, and if Auburn would have been interested in that game instead of pissed off they didn't make the playoff, I don't think they're claiming a national championship. But that's just how I see it. But I just think Florida. I'm with Yancey, and I do believe Florida's going to be better. I mean, again, I don't see
I
a
think personnel is going to be better. My issue is going to be, it's still play calling, it's still scheme. There's still no offensive core. I mean, there's not going to be an OC. So, and Billy's
That's
already
concerned.
Billy came out and said that. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. So, and I know there's this, a lot of new positions that pop up now that it's hard for this guy to follow sometimes, because it's like statisticians and all these assistant to the assistant of the offensive line. It's a lot of
that's ridiculous.
And Florida is, I believe, still the biggest coaching staff in the SEC.
It is.
I believe it is.
They have one.
And I think that's been part of their problem, to be honest to God. I think we saw that early on, for Florida, and I think I've always said he's a great recruiter. He's a really nice guy. People like him. I'm not saying he's a bad football coach. I really am not. I'm just saying, I think after talking to guys like Urban Meyer, hearing comments from like Steve Spurrier and stuff like that, I asked Urban Meyer directly, would you won the national championship at Florida without Dan Mullen in your ear? He said no. He said, no, I wouldn't have won it. Dan Mullen was the key to his success, along his career. So, and he says, he needs somebody that's not caught up into the sideline, what's happening in the energy there, that's out of that sort of that third party perspective. And I think that's where Florida really could have gotten better. And what might be, sort of frustration from Florida fan, at least for me, is that you could have gotten them better. You had the resources, there were a couple of guys out there. So anyway, I'm disappointed but I'm happy to be wrong.
Look, if resources and money were everything, Texas and Texas A&M would win national championships every year. Okay.
Yeah.
That they're not. You got to have it. I'm with Yancey about Florida. Well, first off, it's paralysis by analysis. You got too many people. Trim it up, lean it up. Just make decisions. But I'm like Yancey. I'm with you. You look at that schedule now. Yeah, it looks tough, but a lot's going to happen between now and the time you play those teams. The way they play the week before you play them and the way you play the week before you play them has a lot to do with the matchups. People talk about matchups. What's most important is the matchups on game day. That's what matters. Like, you may be down to your second or third guy at the rush end, at the edge rusher. You don't know that. But
yeah,
I think it's fun. Yancey, look, got just a minute or two left here. I love what we're seeing, though, is that Oklahoma and Texas are coming in. It's making schools like Ole Miss push even harder on the gas pedal. I think it's good.
But you look at Oklahoma; they've really improved themselves this spring in the spring portal, where there's not as many good players in the portal in the spring as there is in December, January period. But Oklahoma did an outstanding job there. Again, I'm really curious to see what happens with Texas. They lost so much along the line of scrimmage. They lost the heart and soul of their defensive line and players. And, as you mentioned, Bo Davis, arguably the top defensive line coach in the country, now over there at LSU. If Texas's problems was always the physicality of the game, right? I used to call them, two-hand touch flag football. That's what the Big 12 was about for about 25 years to me, right?
Correct.
They put up 55 points, look real pretty, and give up 48. Just not physical enough. And I'm really curious to see, Texas making that adjustment to the SEC. Now, we saw how they played against Alabama last year. They could do it, but they lost so much. Those three stud defensive linemen and Bo Davis. That's a lot to replace in 1 year entering the SEC, where you got to do that week in and week out. That's a team that I think that's set up to disappoint more than any of the others.
It is. Hey, Yancey, we've run out of time. Catch him, folks. Great stuff as always. Rodney Orr got caught in traffic with rescheduling. Hey, that's the off season, man. We're doing this every day. Hey, go out and make great things happen. God bless you. Follow all of our sponsors on our website, sidelines.live. See you in the morning.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shopp's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.